welcome into another episode of Decent Christian Music Talk. I'm Eric McClanahan. If you follow me on Twitter, you may know me as in Everglow. If you don't follow me there, I'd love to have you around. I'm here once again with AJ Simmons, who was with me on the previous episode to go over our top 80s albums, our favorites of the decade. And now we're back to discuss our 90s favorites. Before we get into it, I wanted to talk about the year-end CCM Twitter polls that we did, and thank everybody for voting. Just going to quickly go through the top 10 albums. Number 10 was Canonic Metanoia by Lacey Sturm. Number 9 was Night Aches by Simler. Number 8, In Simple Trust by Adrian Mathenia, who interacts with us on CCM Twitter a lot. Number 7, Grim Age by The Classic Crime. Number 6, Caves Need to Breathe. Number 5, Skeleton Psalms by Disciple. Number 4, I Can't Find the Edges of You by Citizens. Number 3, The Cannonballers by Colony House. Number 2, Javelin by Sufjan Stevens. And number 1 was Hope by NF, which that album was also in my personal top 10. And then the song of the year was The Cave by Need to Breathe. And the special release of the year was Switchfoot's Beautiful Letdown, our version. So thanks everybody for participating in that. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Leave a comment. Let us know what your favorite 90s albums are. First, we'll talk about, I guess, some honorable mentions. AJ, if there's anything you want to say, I should have probably given you a minute to speak on just, whatever before I flew into this. But how you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, man. I mean, there's nothing else to say. I did my intro last time. Who I am, go watch the other video. But yeah, so honorable mentions. So growing up in a rural area before the internet, with parents had very different music tastes than I did. I didn't have easy access to learning about music that wasn't necessarily like on mainstream radio. For me, massive game changers are movie soundtracks. And so I want to talk about some movie soundtracks that I think that would count in our list, but I don't know if I would have found the music I found. I already shouted out Wedding Singer and Grosse Pointe Blank because of my introduction to 80s music through those soundtracks. But others that were hugely important for discovering new music were the soundtrack to like Cruel Intentions, So I Married an Axe Murderer, and then Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. Again, thinking about context. Like other awesome soundtracks from the 90s movies, and like 90 movies include like Singles, Trainspotting, and Pulp Fiction, but like I wasn't rocking those as like a 10 to like 13-year-old in the 90s, so those didn't. I found those after the fact, and then at those point, I'd already found a lot of that music, and I was like, yeah, this is good music, it's good soundtracks. But those weren't not as like impactful to me than the 6 that I mentioned across: Wedding Singer, Grosse Pointe Blank, Cruel Intentions, So I Married an Axe Murderer, Batman Forever, and Batman and Robin, which I think also probably says something about my movie taste a bit. But yeah, movie soundtracks huge, right? And like unfortunately, I think a well-crafted movie soundtrack is like a lost art these days. I think maybe into the aughts there is still some good movie soundtracks being thrown together. Not so much these days. So largely, my honorable mentions are those. So I will kick it back to you for yours.
For me, a lot of samplers and compilation albums were big. The Seltzer compilations were huge for me. And like the $1.99 Simply samplers from Cordant. Like, I was a preteen and teenager and didn't have a whole lot of disposable income, and streaming didn't exist, so those samplers were huge in helping me discover new artists and songs that I wouldn't have access to otherwise, especially stuff that wasn't being played on the radio. I think it was my introduction to Supertones and MXPX were from those compilations and samplers.
We'll talk more about those guys later.
Okay. And then Rich Mullins' Songs compilation was absolutely huge for me. None of his actual albums made my top 10. The Jesus record almost did, but not quite. But I had the songs compilation on cassette, and I wore the thing out, and I made my independent fundamental Baptist preacher listen to it, and I don't think he was a big fan. It's too rocking for him. He was like, "I'm not sure where you're planning on singing these songs, but it probably isn't going to be here."
Love that.
So yeah, felt like a big rebel listening to CCM back in those days. So that's a lot of my honorable mentions. I guess our methodology for choosing our top 10 was from we did a list for every year, a top 10 of every year, and we went from that and concocted a top 10 overall. And this is based, I believe, on just our personal preferences and tastes. We're not saying these are the best albums of all time, even though that's what gets the clicks, I'm sure. But these are our favorites. And I'm going to send out a tweet right now asking you all to comment with your favorites of the decade, and we'll read some of those off at the end of the video. And we don't know what each other has picked, so
yeah, we don't even know our yearly one.
Yeah,
we're going completely blind in this. So this will be fun.
Yeah. We may not even know many of the albums that the other has picked.
I think we'll overlap a bit, but I definitely know at least one of mine is going to be really obscure. But yeah, this will be interesting. At least in the 80s, like we had seen each other's like yearly, so we had a sense. I think going into this, you weren't shocked I loved the Smiths.
Right.
I was not shocked you liked the Cure.
You're right.
This, I don't know. Let's find out.
And at the end, AJ is going to go over his just a list of CCM albums of the 90s. Is it a top 10? Is that what?
Yeah, I did line on. Yeah. So, given the theme of the show.
Yeah. I'll have plenty of CCM in mind, so hopefully the CCM Twitter people will not come at us with pitchforks. Not that you did last time, which it'll be fun. All right. All right. What's your number 10, AJ?
Well, it's talking about CCM. We're going to start off with some CCM. Number 10 is DC Talk, Jesus Freak.
Nice.
I mean, obviously I'm a big fan of the title track, right? Like I remember going into the mall and putting on the headphones in the record shop and hearing that for the first time and being like, yeah, this. And, it brings out this like childlike need to go absolutely feral while listening to like music, like just absolutely jamming out. And that's with, some admittedly, I think, weak lines and verses, and they're a little cheesy and stuff at times, but sound is awesome. The chorus nails it. They're top notch, right? But of course, besides Jesus Freak, there are other tracks on the album. Colored People, What If I Stumble, Between You and Me, and their version of In the Light, I think is fantastic as well. Did this crack your top 10, or is this I don't want to spoil things later?
It's not in my top 10. At the end of the 90s, it may have been. It's not. I'm nostalgic about it, but I don't enjoy it as much as I used to. Maybe it's from being overplayed a little bit on my end, but some other albums that I've played just as much did make my top 10. So I don't know. I mean, it's still a great album. It's obviously one of the most important Christian albums ever.
Yeah. This edged out Goo Goo Dolls, Jimmy Eat World, and then a third band that I'll talk about later because they're more obscure. But yeah, just edged out. I had to go back and re-listen to everything, and it kind of was like, I do think maybe nostalgia got this over the finish line a little bit, but it's there, and it's recorded now. It's on the record. I can't change it. But what about for you? What was your number 10?
My number 10 is actually an R&B album. In the 90s, I was into country, I was into R&B, I was into CCM, I was into pop, a little bit of everything. I wanted to put a country album here, but a lot of them just have a couple tracks that are kind of hokey on them. But Tracy Lawrence is one of his albums almost made it. But number 10 is Words by the Tony Rich Project.
Mm-hmm.
Who the lead single, big single off that was Nobody Knows, which hit number 2 on the pop charts. And I don't know how many people actually like really dug into the album, but it's the darkest R&B album I've ever heard. He sings a lot about hauntings and ghosts and blood oaths and robberies and self-harm, and it's not what you would expect. And it still catches me off guard when I go, wow, having not heard it, that it is what it is, and that it went mostly just as being seen as a one-hit wonder type, because I think it's a really fantastic album. And it really it leans more towards a singer-songwriter R&B type, more so than just a pure like music, beat-driven R&B. I think the songwriting is excellent. I think he's unfairly overlooked. But yeah, that's my number 10.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So what's your number 9? Or didn't you have any thoughts on that?
I don't. No, that's neat. I was gonna make a joke of like, I don't think you're putting Keith Sweat on this one, are you? Like, it was 90s Keith Sweat making it on this countdown. That was gonna be my only comment. But no, I appreciate the otter stuff like that. So like that's neat. But my number 9 is Third Eye Blind's self-titled debut. So, it was really close again. Like there were a bunch of albums that just were like bunched up that I might maybe honestly in a different day or a different mood maybe reordered. But this came in at number 9 for me. And Third Eye Blind has been like consistent, right? Like when this first dropped in 97 to now, I've listened to it, I'm gonna say at least yearly. Versus like DC Talks, like Jesus Forgetting, Boomerang's out. I'll listen to it, it'll swing out for a long time, and then it'll come back for a little while. But this has been pretty consistent. And Stand on Tracks are obviously like Semi-Charmed Life and Jumper, but beyond the 2 like hits that drove this album, like how's it gonna be? I Want You, Losing a Whole Year, Motorcycle Drive By, and London. I used to like really dig London as a kid. But yeah, this is again kind of like one of those, I don't think it registered as a kid like how dark of an album this is, and then you go back and you listen to it and you're like, oh, okay, it's excellent, but a little darker than I remember it as a kid. But yeah, that's my number 9.
Loaded album, lots of songs that I've heard many times, whether I've listened to the album as much or not. It's hard to escape the big songs on that.
And then it sounds good live. I've seen them live several times, and they sound just fantastic live.
Wow. I've never seen them, but they are coming nearby, I think, pretty soon, so I get to check them out.
There you go.
My number 9 is Adore by the Smashing Pumpkins. Yes.
Okay, yeah. That's in my top 50. I forget exactly where, but it's not my top 10.
Okay. I was thinking probably not the most popular Pumpkins album to rank so highly.
No, but it's got some killer tracks on it, man.
Yeah. It's a moody, vibey album. It's the crunchy guitars are mostly gone. It's got some Cure vibes to it, I think. And that's kind of where my mindset, defaults to, is that kind of just moody melancholy that's also beautiful, and that's where my my brain wants to be when I'm listening to music. A lot of times I have to train it to like other things, I think.
What jumps out to you on the album? Like what are some of the standouts to you?
The first track that stood out to me was Crestfallen. An ex-girlfriend of mine in high school gave me the disc, just the disc, no case, just the disc. I guess she didn't like it, and I remember laying on
the reason she's an ex-girlfriend.
It's true. And I remember just laying on the couch, and I put it in the home stereo system, and that was just the track that jumped out to me at the time, and probably went a decade without listening to it again, and got back into it during some Pumpkins deep dive or something at some point, and ended up being my favorite Pumpkins album, despite Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness being like, the singles on that were huge for turning me into a fan of like mainstream rock music. 1979, seeing that video on MTV all the time, and things like that.
We'll be discussing Melancholy.
Okay, yeah.
But For Martha on Adore is excellent. Like,
Yeah.
it's a piano-driven song about his mom, and it is so good. And like, obviously, Ava, Adore, and Perfect maybe aren't for this audience, but those are pretty good too.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, For Martha like has a lot of depth to it that like, and it's different. It's being driven by the pianos. I've seen him perform that live, and that was like super good.
Wow, I bet.
But yeah, I like that. I'm surprised by it. I like it. That you're right. Like strong Cure vibes. And Cure guy.
Yeah. All right, what's your number 8?
Number 8. So I'm not 100% sure, but I think my first music-related celebrity crush was Shirley Manson. And it was either her or somebody higher up on my list that we'll get to. Either way, I have a deep love of Shirley Manson and therefore Garbage. To the point that like randomly I recognized a song by her other band Angelfish at a party like 15, 20 years ago. And it led to this like wonderful 30-minute conversation with the self-described anarchist with a shared love of Shirley Manson. So yeah, Garbage is self-titled, 1995. Is excellent. It is a key example of like the angsty female-fronted 90s music that I love. And that carries on to today. I've had Blonde Shell in my like top albums for this year, and it was that because it sounds like a 90s album. But yeah, so of course Garbage is in there. This album has the obvious hits of, Only Half a Minute Rain, Stupid Girl, but Queer, Vow, A Stroke of Luck. Those are all solid tracks. Like, this is such a good album. And their follow-up is also in my top 50 as well. But like this one I love just more. But yeah, it is such a good debut, especially as a debut.
Yeah.
But yeah, fantastic tracks.
It's one that I haven't listened to all the way through a whole lot. I have a few times, but the singles were, really impactful. I remember hearing Stupid Girl when I first started listening to like pop radio. Our local pop station played that song, and it felt so out of place, but like in a good way. And so I'm a fan of it. Not one that I probably need to spend more time with as a whole rather than just the singles, but I do enjoy it. My number 8 is Candy Coated Water Drops by Plum. This album I did not expect to make my top 10. It would be a firm top 40 or 50 album, but until I started, breaking them all down by a year, like it just took a huge leap for some reason as we were making these lists. And it's it's a little poppier than her debut, but like I think she does it pretty well, and I guess it's more of a band project, I guess, than what she does now. And I really feel like there were some pretty cool instrumental things going on, and just a good listen, pretty diverse. Has some rockin' tracks, has some kind of electronic feel tracks, has some Sarah McLachlan type stuff. I played it at work, and the guys at work really enjoyed it, and it's like, yeah, I do too.
Yeah, no.
So it
huge impact too, right? Like, I mean, obviously Evanescence is the obvious one that like directly connects to Plum, but other major artists I think owe a lot of debt to Plum. And I want to say like Kelly Clarkson has cited Plum as like as a influence before, which is one of those things of like Amy Lee and Kelly Clarkson cited the same. But that makes sense, right? Like,
yeah.
But yeah, all right, I dig that one. It's good album.
All right, what's your number 7?
All right, so some important context on this, and for this one and another one on my top 10 is I spent most of my life living in Arizona, so Arizona music has a huge attachment to me, right? So number 7 is Gin Blossom's New Miserable Experience. I'm a big fan of that like 1990s Tempe or Southwest sound, like take your pick. That like the Gin Blossoms and Pistoleros did Hot Workshop, and then one of the other bands we'll get to in a minute were a part of, right, where they took like country and folk and like grunge and like power and jangle pop into like this new sound. That is really distinct and is like really Arizona. And it took off, right? Like a lot of the like adult alternative stuff has that. This has the big hits of like Hey Jealousy and Found Out About You, that are just fantastic tunes. But like Until I Fall Away, Allison Road, 29 and Hold Me Down are great tunes. Like their follow-up album is also fantastic, but and it's landed in my top 50, but like this one is just so good.
Yeah, New Miserable Experience is in my top 100 albums of all time. Just missed my top 10 of the 90s. I think I had it at like number 18 or 19 on my 90s list, but it is in my current version of my top 100 albums of all time. Yeah, great album. My number 7 is The Message by For Him. Very CCM album, pretty poppy, vocal based CCM that I absolutely wore out the cassette of in my mom's car, and she liked it too. And that was a big part of CCM being acceptable in our house. That was, all about Southern gospel and hymns. For a while, my dad was into country, but as far as my mom, we were mostly into Southern gospel and things. But For Him, Out of Eden kind of turned Petra, even kind of turned her into a CCM fan. So yeah,
Beyond Belief.
Yeah, lots of memories listening to The Message by For Him. And I was on an episode of Church Jams Now recently where we broke down this album and talked about it. So if you want to hear more of my thoughts and the Church Jams Now guys' thoughts, go over to their page wherever you listen to podcasts and check that out. All right, you got any thoughts on that, or go on to your number 6?
Yeah, let's go on to number 6. I had zero thoughts on that. I'm gonna be honest. That was not on my radar at all, and has not re-entered the radar. Courtesy of CCM Twitter. So, but number 6. So this one is the first CD I ever owned, and I got to own it for approximately 1 hour before my mom heard some of the tracks that were not played on the radio and confiscated it, and that is Alanis Morissette, Jagged Little Pill. She replaced the album, and we'll talk about the album that she replaced it with, because it is one of my all-time favorites. But yes, full of angst, introspection, passion. This is an excellent album, again, of female-fronted 90s grungy tunes that I dig. Radio tracks of You Ought to Know, Hand in My Pocket, and Ironic are all classics, but like Head Over Feet, Right Through You, and Perfect are also fantastic tunes on there. But yeah, this one got confiscated for a few years when I was a kid, though I continued to love it and listen to it through now.
You Ought to Know was on my 1996 Grammy nominee CD when I first got my CD player, and that track made me very uncomfortable at the time. So I skipped over that one quite a bit at the time. It is my tattoo artist's favorite album of all time, because I ask that question to everyone and then forever associate them with their favorite album of all time.
There you go.
So
they do good work. They like good music.
Yeah, exactly. And that is a really solid album. Lots of hits. Yeah. So my number 6 is Wish by The Cure.
Yep.
Got
on my top 50. I forget exactly where, but number 20, nice. I believe.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I think it's their second best album behind Disintegration, personally.
Okay.
Yeah, probably not a lot of people would think that, but I do have the 30th anniversary package here with two discs and 3 discs actually and whatnot. But a lot more radio friendly than Disintegration.
And I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, Friday I'm in Love and Letters to Elise,
Yeah.
right, are two fantastic Cure tracks.
Yeah.
Rest of the album doesn't really work for me as much as those two. But
Really?
Friday I'm in Love and A Letter to Elise. Like, A Letter to Elise is one of my, like, hands down favorite Cure tracks of all time.
Yeah.
And that is, again, one that's not maybe listed a lot by people as a favorite. But yes, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good.
Yeah, those two songs in particular stand out. Like, those are like 5s out of 5s for me.
Yeah. I think it's, I mean, I obviously love it as a whole. But I understand people who especially were into their 80s stuff a lot, not really being into it as much. But I from what I've seen online, it's starting to gain appreciation. I think its score on Rate Your Music has jumped up about 10 points over the last decade. So seems to be, I kind of use that site a lot as to gauge kind of what how the perception of albums are changing over time.
Yeah.
But anyways, that is my number 6. What do you have for number 5?
So I think my number 5 partially explains some of my favorite Christian albums in the 90s that we'll talk about in a bit, because it's a bit of a gateway drug to ska music. And that is No Doubt's Tragic Kingdom. Is I have the distinct memory of like the first time I saw the Just a Girl video on TV and just being like, what in the world is this? This is amazing. And if I remember right, like this was on my Christmas list in 1995. Along with like Power Ranger action figures, right? And I got both, so yeah, it was a good year. Like the singles are all good on this, right? Just a Girl, Spiderwebs, Don't Speak, Excuse Me, Mister, Sunday Morning. Like those are 5 ridiculously good singles. Like not many albums get past like 1 or 2 singles, let alone 5. But when you go beyond that, like Happy Now, ended on this, and Tragic Kingdom, like the title track, and a very different track, and like holds its own. It's so much good stuff. Again, angsty, strong messages, like all wrapped up in a killer horn section. I like a couple albums after this one from them, but this one like really sticks with me as just like an incredible album. And it's like such a jump from the album before that. Like the album before that has like one song that I like, I think genuinely. And then this shows up and just like rains down a bunch, and their follow-up has a few, like, maybe to a handful, if that. But like this just hit, and then like I said, I think it teed me up for a few albums in a couple of years. I got a taste of it from No Doubt.
My kids have become good fans of No Doubt's singles from that album. We watch music videos together occasionally, and I have a playlist of music videos they like, and Spiderwebs and Don't Speak and Just a Girl are all staples of that playlist. So I think that's gonna connect with a lot of the next generations, probably females especially. If their parents turn them onto it or try to or play it for them. So play good music for your kids. My number 5 is Americana by Starflyer 59. My case is kind of banged up there. But it's become my favorite Starflyer 59 album. It's not as acclaimed as the 2 albums before it or the album after it, but I guess it's kind of more of a transitional album, but it's still purely shoegaze, but they allow for some other influences in there, and over time it's just become my go-to Starflyer album. And I mean, he has a catalog of like 20 incredible albums, but that's kind of become the one that I appreciate the most.
I don't know, it wasn't the Water in the Martin household when they were growing up, and they got 2 good bands out of it.
Incredible. Yeah. Yep. All right, that's all I got for that. What do you got for number 4?
All right, number 4. This is probably my most obscure pick on my list, and that is, The Refreshments, Fizzy Fuzzy Big and Buzzy. I'm not sure if this is anywhere on your radar, if you know it.
The Refreshment sounds like a familiar name to me, but I may be thinking of the Replacements. I'm not sure.
They're part of the sound, right? But I've gotten Gin Blossoms and whatnot. They might be. You might know their most famous song, and that is the theme to King of the Hill.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That was their warm-up music.
Oh.
And became the theme song to King of the Hill. Like, this did well in the 90s, and there's some love for them across the country. But in Arizona, Roger Klein, their singer, and his follow-up band, the Peacemakers, are continuing to do really well out there in Arizona and, like, by proxy, the Southwest. And like they blended genres into something really wonderful and interesting. Like, I don't have hardly any country on my top 10. I don't think any in my top 10, and hardly any in my top 50. But this has like some country influence, some folk influence, some like that jangle pop, jangle rock, like some Smiths influence on the guitar work. You know, the songs on there that really stand out, like the hits, if I can put those in quotes there, Banditos and Down Together are probably the two biggest tracks on this. But like Blue Collar Suicide, Mekong, Don't Want to Know, Interstate, Sucker Punch, they're all awesome tunes. And I can say that their frontman is incredibly kind, and he makes some excellent tequila.
I wouldn't say you don't have any country on your top 10, because that last track on the Gin Blossoms album definitely qualifies.
Yeah, it leans into, yeah. A lot of the stuff is like that, like, I don't know, alt country, toying with the country music a little bit. That definitely goes into there. But that might be the most country that I have. But funny enough, like Roger Klein from the Refreshments is a genuine rancher. Like, dude owns a ranch and grew up on it. And so, like, he's probably got more cowboy credibility than, 90% of the people on radio.
Probably.
But yeah. So yeah, I know it's obscure, but it is a favorite of mine. Again, I think showing my Arizona roots here. But go check it out. That might be one of those like hidden gems just in itself. I do have another album of theirs on my hidden gems to check out. But yeah, Refreshments, Peacemakers, go check them out, folks.
I'll have to give that a listen.
What about you for number 4?
My number 4 is a band that was obviously influenced by the Gin Blossoms and probably some others from that area. It's Small Town Poets debut. Yeah. Just loaded front to back. Got it for like my 14th birthday or something like that, and probably didn't leave my CD player, my 5-disc changer for probably a year or so, and I still listen to it a couple times every year. Prophet, Priest, and King, the big first single, is probably my second least favorite song on the album. So that's, I think, speaks to the strength of the whole album, because it is a great song and it's still my second least favorite on it. Yeah, straight. You familiar with that one?
Yeah. I think actually more through CCM Twitter, I think, is the first time, but I think I gave it a listen when that showed up at some point on there, and thought, yeah, it kind of has like that 90s adult alternative sound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. All right. So, that's all I got there.
All right. So we are venturing back into some CCM for me. And that is Jars of Clay, self-titled.
Nice.
There is so much to love about this album. It is one that's very much grown with me through the years too. Like, I loved it as a kid, but I love it now. There are songs that I liked as a kid. There's so much to love about this album. It's an album that has grown with me over the years. When I was younger, I very much loved Flood, Liquid, Sinking, all water-related songs, apparently. And as I've gotten older, my appreciation for Love Song for Savior, Art in Me, and Worlds Apart, especially Worlds Apart, has grown so much. I remember, again, hearing Flood for the first time in the record store, same record store that I heard Jesus Freak, right? Like, it popped in the headphones. I was like, what is this? Like, and having to have the single and getting it, because it was like $1.99 or something like that. And so, we were able to get it, and I had Flood as the A side and Sinking as the B side, and like, boom, both those were great. That was, again, something else. I don't remember if I got it for Christmas, but I definitely ended up with that album like shortly after this came out. Like, this was the first explicitly Christian album that I loved as a kid. That wasn't like, and it didn't feel like my parents' music, right? Like, all due respect to Amy Grant, Michael W. Smith, and Petra. This came out, and Jesus Freak came out like, I don't know, a month later, 2 months later, I'm guessing.
Something like that.
It was like this excellent run, but yeah, this album, I think had a huge influence on a lot of the music that I like, a lot of bands that I still like. And it fits with a lot of like that acoustic guitar driven sound that I seem to like quite a bit. But yeah, a lot to love on this album. I think it's their best album. I think I've seen other folks on CCM Twitter express maybe a different take. And I'm gonna respectfully say that they're wrong. Maybe I get some interactions with this, right? But yes, number 3, Jars of Clay, self-titled.
That's one that's in my top 100 of all time as well, but didn't make my top 10 of the 90s. But I also
album we'd overlap on it would be this.
Well, we would disagree on what their best album is the issue here.
Okay, you can be right.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
My number 3 is All Star United, self-titled. Just such a fun album. My whole family loves it. My mom loves it. I mean, there's what's not to love about the debut All Star United album from 1997. Loaded with just witty lyrics and great hooks and cool instrumentation, and it's just one of the funnest albums out there.
Well, yeah, I mean, this obviously has Smash Hit, which I think is probably their most well-known song, right? But like, I personally think they drop La La Land now, and it maybe causes a little bit of a stir with some folks.
Yeah, and I think if I don't know the details of the management of the band or the label or anything at the time, but I feel like they had real strong mainstream rock potential. Like
they seem like Blur.
Yeah, and I mean maybe the fact that they're not from Britain playing such hip hop influence, maybe that could hurt them. But good music is good music.
Throw a British accent on it. You can take some like accent classes, right? Like, but yeah, this sounds like that Britpop, like definitely Blur, with some others from that Britpop era. But yeah, it is a bit of a surprise that didn't cross over, especially given the attention, because this came out in 96, 97. So like, all right, so post DC Talk, post Jars of Clay, crossing over onto rock radio, right? Like it's not the eras of Michael W. Smith, Steve Curtis Chapman, Amy Grant. Yeah, all of them. Like this is a different era, and they didn't, and that is a weird in retrospect.
Yeah, they had a sound that would have fit at the time. They had the musical chops and the hooks. They just needed, I mean, maybe not do critiques of Christian culture and things like that, and put one of their other songs out there.
Maybe would have played well though. Like
they could have. I mean,
it's again, I don't know. I think they would cause a stir now. And also probably be like now by people for causing that stir.
Right.
They didn't have the opportunity to, I guess, benefit from the online rage culture, Barbra Streisand effect that comes from that, where like I find out about stuff because somebody gets angry about it. I wouldn't have found it before. So, but no, that's a gem of the 90s. That would be a hidden gem for me. Like that is, yes, good album.
Yeah. What you got for number 2?
All right. I mentioned earlier that my mom commandeered my Alanis Morissette Jagged Little Pill, and she replaced it with another album, and that album is Jewel's Pieces of You, 1995. Jewel is the other female singer. If Shirley Manson isn't my first like celebrity music-based crush, it's got to be Jewel if it's one of those two, because I think Fiona Apple came after those two. So the singles on this, like Who Will Save Your Soul, You Were Meant for Me, Foolish Games, all excellent tunes, right? Beyond those, the title track is amazing and kind of related to what we were just saying about All Star United, would certainly cause a stir if dropped, I think, nowadays. If Taylor Swift dropped Pieces of You, I think people would have things to say about that.
Yeah.
I feel that way about Little Sister as well. Like there's some really sharp social commentary there about things that we're still dealing with as I think a society these days. I'm Sensitive, Near You Always, and Adrian are also incredible, introspective, wonderful songs. You know, we messaged a bit about this. Like, this doesn't fall under CCM, but it's adjacent. It exists, I think, in an adjacent world there, which is where a lot of bands I like seem to fall. And then a really funny coincidence about this album. This was my wife's favorite album growing up. And we have very different music tastes. And when I was talking about my list with her the other day, she like noted that she probably wouldn't believe it if somebody back then was like, "Hey, you know what? Future Husband of yours, second favorite album of the '90s is this." Like, she would not have believed that. But it is such a good album. It is, again, like really polished, really well done, sharp, clever, and then like weirdly subversive in ways that, like, all right, Jagged Little Pill is a little bit more blunt about being subversive and like being angry and maybe not necessarily the best thing for a kid to have, but this has some subtext to it that I think makes it quite good. Again, heck of a debut. Follow-ups I like, but not nearly as much as this from her. Man, so good.
I had the Who Will Save Your Soul CD single at the time. Loved it. Loved You Were Meant for Me and Foolish Games. And it was one of those that at the time I didn't have the funds to buy every CD I wanted, but it was one that I like was tempted to buy every time I had, $20, for around that year. And it's funny, I bought a huge lot of like 3,000 CDs a few months ago, and there was like 4 copies of that album in there. I was like, man, all that time I wanted to get a copy and couldn't come up with $20, and now here I got 4 copies that probably cost me about a nickel each. It's just funny how those things happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, solid album overall. I'm especially fond of the singles, but I also had a decade plus head start with those.
Sure.
I think Jewel, if she were marketed as a CCM artist with that album, definitely could have snuck in there. I think a lot of what I qualify as CCM, especially in the '90s, is if it were, in Christian bookstores, and that's how it was marketed. It's more of a marketing term for me.
No, I 100%.
Yeah.
Well, again, and also I think this, in order for that to be marketed as a CCM album, a couple tracks maybe need.
Yeah, maybe a few wordy dirts have to come out there, but
all right, number 2. Let's do it.
My number 2 is the best Jars of Clay album, Much Afraid.
I know you preach the good word. I'm much afraid. It's a good album.
Yeah, I mean, I was totally in love with the Jars of Clay debut, and was so much anticipating Much Afraid when it came out. I waited with blank cassette by the radio for them to play the lead single Crazy Times so I could record it on cassette before the album came out. Did that, jammed it, went to a family Christian store release party for the Much Afraid album, and picked it up there and played the thing like crazy. And I think over time they were pretty even for me, the debut and Much Afraid. Over time I just like Much Afraid more. They're both incredible, obviously. But yeah, Much Afraid, despite being number 2 on here, is probably a better album than my number 1. But this is based on, I guess, what I prefer listening to most right now. But Much Afraid is definitely like top tier, top 12 album all time for me. So that's my number 2.
5 Candles is on that one, right?
Yeah.
That's a track.
Yeah.
That's a good track. That's a heck of a track. I don't think that had any traction at all outside of, but Worlds Apart was, I think, similar on their previous album.
Yeah.
You're like, man, that's a tune.
Yeah, it's a great song.
But yeah, it's just good. I don't think Jars of Clay necessarily have a bad album. I prefer. Maybe nostalgia gets the other one over. I don't know. But no, that's a good album.
Yeah.
All right, we at least overlap on some artists in our time.
Yeah.
So,
Did we? I was trying to think. Did we overlap? We overlapped last time on The Queen is Dead and Disintegration, right?
Yes.
Did you have Disintegration?
Okay. Yeah, both of those were. I think I had Disintegration at 2 or 3.
Yeah.
I don't even. Oh, dude, I've been doing so many of these lists I can't remember. Right? Definitely, I think 2 or 3. Yeah. And then Queen is Dead. So we did overlap on albums there. We're overlapping on artists, because we're about to overlap on the second artist here.
Okay.
I think so. Anything else about Jars of Clay? Much Afraid.
That's it. Let's get to your. What are we? Are we on number 1?
Yeah, we are on number 1, and that is Smashing Pumpkins' Melancholy.
Nice.
So I almost disqualified this because it's a double disc release, but I didn't, because in the 80s top 50, there's some multi-disc releases on there, and I was like, oh, it's not the Pumpkins' fault that they happen to have a bunch of tunes and release it as 1 album. Because this would be different too if they had released like Melancholy Volume 1 in March and number 2 in October. So I'd probably consider those 2 separate albums, but now they threw it all together in 1 album, right?
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I did, because it would be a lie to say that this wasn't my favorite album of the night. It's like, even if I had to throw it, this would have been like all I talked about for my honorable mention. And a funny story about this album too is that it was banned from my household growing up until 2002, till summer of 2002. I loved the Pumpkins. I loved the radio stuff, but given the subject material and given Billy Corgan's image, he was not allowed in the household until my my stepdad came and moved in, and I was like, yeah, you can have this now, and handed it to me the day he moved in. I was like, you sure know how to win over somebody. But yeah, Smashing Pumpkins were not allowed in the household until 2002.
Wow.
But this has Tonight, 1979, Zero, Bullet with Butterfly Wings, Bodies, 33, We Only Come Out at Night, Beautiful, Lily, and To Forgive. Like, I counted like 12 tracks, 10 or 12 tracks, and I was like, these are all things that like are 4 to 5s on a 5-point scale to me. But mostly the rest of the album is good too. There's a few that I think he gets a little too shoegazy for my taste, but man. And again, it's 2, no kidding. It's 2 albums put together. Yeah. There's bound, like, by average, it's 5 or 6 good tracks. That puts it pretty similar to Jewel and Jars of Clay and others for me. Man, like, this is such a killer album, and like, I will forever have love for the Pumpkins because of this album. He's luckily not done a full Morrissey, but Corgan has said some things as he's gotten older that perhaps I don't necessarily agree with, though he owns a pro wrestling company now, so that maybe endears him to me a little bit too. But yeah, this is just such an album. I think it encapsulates so much of, like, just, again, angsty, introspective, and it's 90s music all packaged together.
Yeah. I find myself wishing that it had been a single disc with just the best stuff. Save the others for, a B-sides or even, it's enough good stuff there to even make it just a second album. But that, I guess, kind of would have killed the theme. But almost every double album, I find myself fantasizing about what it would look like if only the best songs were on there and how that would rank in my list. Like, if you take the best 10, 12 songs from Melancholy, it's a top 5 album of the 90s for me.
But here, I think I made a similar comment when we were talking in the 80s about Sandinista from The Clash. That, like, man, if they had just trimmed the fat on that, top album.
Yeah.
But yes. All right. What's your number 1?
My number 1 is Live the Life by Michael W. Smith. This album has, like, I liked it when it came out a lot. Obviously, this was another one that I went to the Family Christian Store release party of. Got a Michael W. Smith poster with my purchase that I had hanging on my bedroom wall for several years. And it's aged so well for me. The production on it, I think, it's not of its time. Like, in the 90s, everything was a little more gruff and
his production's always great. Like,
yeah,
any of his albums, I think he has top-notch production.
Yeah, you're right. And the songs on this one don't feel dated like his earlier '90s albums do. Um, like I think most of the songs on here they could have come out in 1985. They could have come out in 2015. You know that this it just sounds like you can't date it. I think, and it's one that it's a rare mainstream CCM album that I like to put my headphones on and listen to. There's a lot of depth in the production and in the layering of background vocals, and has a song that was cut from the Titanic soundtrack, so it has that kind of soundtrack with the like Irish kind of vibe to it. And Love Me Good is the only song on there that I've had trouble, like I've gone back and forth with not liking it being on the album, liking it being on the album, but wish it was placed somewhere else in the track list. But recently I've come to terms with the fact it is there. It is track number 2, and and it doesn't deter my love for the album. It just feels slightly misplaced, but I would still qualify it as about as perfect of an album as you can get. It's top 12 all time for me.
There you go.
Yep.
I had no Michael W. Smith in any of my years, but weirdly, is it his 98, 99 that's got like This Is Your Time and stuff on it?
Yeah, that was nearly after this.
Yeah, nearly cracked my top 10. I think it got booted. I don't remember what year that would have been. But I think they got booted by Foo Fighters, maybe. It's either Foo Fighters or MXPX, looking at the 2 years. I don't remember what year that would have been.
Speaking of trimming the fat on albums, all the songs from that This Is Your Time album were songs that were written for Live the Life. And
no kidding.
Yeah. I think I know at least the majority of it, maybe all of it.
Yeah, my family had that one. We listened to it. I think my dad in particular had that one, and we listened to it quite a bit. But yeah, like This Is Your Time and a few others on there were just like solid tunes, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, when that was in my initial like top 10 for that, I was like, where'd that come from? Had to think about that a little bit. But yeah, no, he's like I said, he does solid tunes. So
yeah, I agree.
A little shocked that no Amy Grant, man.
Heart in Motion, like it's in my top 25 of the decade. It was one like it predated my my getting into CCM, and I think it's her best album. Her Behind the Eyes album was also, that's the first Amy Grant album that I bought, and I loved it. But over time, I've come to see Heart in Motion as her best album. But it's just, I don't think I have the sentimental attachment to it as I do a lot of the ones that made my list.
Fair enough. All right, there's our top 10 of the 90s.
Yep.
We got hidden gems. You want to do some hidden gems?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So grew up in Southern Arizona. I have an interest in Spanish language rock and like alternative music in Spanish. And so one of my hidden gems comes from that, and that is Soda Stereo's Canción Animal. So in particular, check out De Música Ligera. It's my favorite. It is one of my favorite songs of the 90s. It is an incredible rock tune that like fit that era. Now all the lyrics and stuff are in Spanish, but like the guitar work, listen to it. Like you don't have to know what the words are to be like, no, this sounds like a 90s grunge album, like early 90s grunge tune. There's others on there, but yeah. So Soda Stereo's Canción Animal. Have you even heard of that album?
I have.
Okay, awesome.
Stereo. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I don't know that I've ever listened to them, but I am aware of their existence.
There you go. I'll take it. But yeah, like this dropped, I think, 1990, and it is killer. And it sounds like if bands in the like mid to early 90s weren't listening to this, it's a sure coincidence that they sound a heck of a lot like them, in my opinion. Next up, and I mentioned these guys earlier, is the Refreshments. Their second album, The Bottle and Fresh Horses. And I know that they're a bit niche. I get that. Like, my Arizonans really showing here. But, and this is probably more true about their second album, at least Fizzy Fuzzy Big and Buzzy, had a little bit more crossover appeal. And like one time a bartender referenced it. And I was like, hey, you can keep the change. They started singing one of their songs that has that line in there. This one, I don't think I met anybody outside of Arizona that knows it or likes it. Or does it have some ties to Arizona, I should say. But it almost cracked my top 10. I think this is going to end up at like number 12, I think is where it ended up. But Preacher's Daughter, Wanted, Sin Nombre, and Una Soda are four that stand out to me on this. It's a bit more country sounding, I think, than their first one. And speaking of country, another hidden gem for me is Deanna Carter's Did I Shit My Legs for This?
Yep.
Now, I don't have a lot of straight country on my list for the 90s because I'm not a huge fan of the country music of the 90s. Folks tend to had like Garth Brooks, like the big double disc or multi-disc set of his, but that is not my jam. But what exception is this album? Like, this is straight country, the whole album, right? In particular, I used to jam We Dance Anyway a ton as a kid. It is a heck of a tune.
It is.
There's other good tracks on there, but yeah, in particular,
Strawberry Wine.
Yeah, Strawberry Wine would be another one that I did that's on there. It's such and again, I don't know other folks like outside my family that I've ever chatted with about that. So like, hey, you knew it. That's fantastic. But in my last hidden gem, I'm just going to cheat and say Joy Electric.
Nice.
Because anything by them appears to be a hidden gem. I had no idea who they were, and like I listened to Tooth and Nail bands growing up, and I think that's because of how I got introduced to Tooth and Nail bands that I didn't come across them. But like, go listen to my 80s list. How the heck do I not know Joy Electric and love Joy Electric as like a teenager, right? A couple of their albums have cracked my, I think, top 50, if I remember correctly. I am a little skeptical of recency bias because I found them in June, July. I don't know, it's through you that I found them. But it's hard to argue when they're one of the top listed bands, apparently on my year in review.
Right.
And my kids as well love Sugar Rush. It is one of my top listened to tracks, but I think that's partially my kids love that as well. But even their other albums beyond that, and we'll talk a little bit more about them. But yes, as a hidden gem, anything from Joy Electric, just have fun. If you given this kind of lean into Christian songs, maybe it would be that album in particular. But yeah, what were some of your hidden gems?
Phonos, Goes Around, Comes Around. They came out in 99. They were kind of like, I guess if you're going by the Christian music comparison chart, they were like the Foo Fighters, but British. If I remember correctly, that the ad for the album I used to have hanging on my bedroom wall said, "The British are coming, and this time they brought guitars," and compared them as like a mishmash of Smashing Pumpkins and Foo Fighters and Goo Goo Dolls. And I think it's pretty accurate. It's a really good album. Just missed my top 10. And then 5 O'Clock People, The Nothing Venture, kind of George Clay Caedmon's Call type, coffee house rock. Sorry is the song on there that might be my favorite song of the 90s. Just incredible song. Stavesacres, Speakeasy album. These are probably not artists who are, really hidden gems for people in CCM Twitter, but for people really not.
They are for me, man.
Okay.
And I'm gonna text me after. I hope I need these.
And then 7 Day Jesus, I don't know if you know them, another kind of Goo Goo Dolls, Foo Fighters type band. And then I guess if I can qualify country as some hidden gems, since you did, Tracy Lawrence, As I See It Now album was big for me. Let's see what else. Mary Chapin Carpenter's "Come On, Come On" was like my dad's favorite album when I was a kid, and he played that cassette all the time. The Sundays, Static and Silence. Not country. I didn't do much of a transition there, but Harriet Wheeler is might be my very favorite female vocalist in all of music. Just love her voice. Would listen to her sing the phone book. Sixpence None the Richer, obviously not a hidden gem, but This Beautiful Mess album is a bit of a hidden gem.
That's
great album.
50 towards the bottom, but it's in my top 50.
Okay, and then last one I'll mention is also probably not really a hidden gem, but it was for me, and it's become sneaky one of my favorites of the decade. It's Fumbling Towards Ecstasy by Sarah McLachlan.
All right.
Yeah, she's been a sneaky artist for me who's come in and started getting a lot of playing time for me. But I'd say those are a lot of my hidden gems.
Again, text me. I have some homework after this conversation, because those are hidden gems to me. But it's a nice transition, I think, for the top 10 90s CCM albums for me. And remember, folks, these are just my favorites and are heavily shaped by mainstream crossover hits and my older sister's love for Christian ska and punk from like 1998 onward. I can't say like my folks' love of Amy Grant and Michael W. Smith was there, but stayed out of my top 10 here. But did, like I said, especially Michael W. Smith, nearly creep in. I'm gonna say like nostalgia probably plays a huge role in these, probably more so than outside of CCM Twitter, just given the age that this stuff hit. And then I got to give credit to like the CCM Twitter, right, for some of this, because I don't know, when did you like really start pushing it? This past summer? I don't know. I think it showed up in my timeline somewhere around that.
Yeah, the tournament in March was probably where a lot of people... It had been building some momentum before that, but
yeah, there's definitely some credit to CCM Twitter and you in particular for this list. But again, I try to balance that like recency bias that I'm concerned a bit about. But I let it creep in a little bit. So number 10 is Rich Mullins' Liturgy album. I had heard of Rich before. I hadn't given him much thought or listened to his music much. But man, like your love for him and like got me to like give his music another try. And then beyond his music, the way he lived his life is incredibly admirable. I think, we were chatting a bit about this earlier. I think you can see an impact of his music on CCM artists, but I think you also can see his ethos kind of carry through in some CCM artists. And that is perhaps the larger compliment. I have to look at my phone because I actually wrote down a couple of the tracks in particular that I liked on this one. Oh, Peace and Big and Strong, I think were two that in particular jumped out to me. What do you think about that album?
It is, I believe, his most overall beloved album, but it's probably middle of the pack for me. Hold Me Jesus is on there, is one of his best songs, and one that I imagine I'll be singing on my deathbed if I have opportunity. It's one of those songs that means a lot to me. The album as a whole is great. It's just it's not one of my go-tos when I listen to him.
Fair enough. Number 9 will make certain followers of yours happy, and that is MXPX, Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo. All right. So I actually stopped watching my career's acoustic streaming show tonight to jump on with you to do this. I gained love for MXPX through my older sister and her friends who were in MXPX and way more that we'll talk a bit about some. And this is the album that was like my entrance to them, right? I do have a bit of a controversial take. I don't think that this is their best record. I don't actually think their best music was done on Tooth and Nail. Which I know others that probably disagree. I have expressed that on Twitter before, and they have pushed back. But I do like I'm Okay, You're Okay, What's Mine Is Yours, and Self-Serving with a Purpose are favorites here. I have to admire my career and company for taking shots at their record label through their record on said label. That is very punk rock of them. And but it's the record company care about, they make money off of them. But I kind of fell out of the love of MXPX like high school, college-ish, and then they came back around thanks to an appearance on the Chip and Joanna Gaines show. My wife was watching it, and I just was playing on my phone, looked up, and I was like, hey, I know this guy. And I actually do like their more recent releases as well. But yeah, and then during like COVID, my career has been doing these streaming concerts like with an absurd frequency and charges nothing for them. To the point that I think two of my friends I jump on for like playing video games think MXPX has become one of my favorite bands because they happen to be doing these shows when we're gaming, and I have it up. It's on. It's free. Like I'm gonna have it up. But yeah, so MXPX slowly going. Then number 8, Joy Electric, Christian Songs. As much as you love the other Martin brother, Joy Electric has become my jam thanks to you. Favorites on this are Voice of the Young, Children of the Lord, which feels like a sequel to Sugar Rush in my mind. Like very similar tunes. Lift Up Your Hearts, Make My Life a Prayer is another good one. Switching back to the ska punk at number 7 is 5 Iron Frenzy, our newest album ever. I know some folks will be really happy about that, and then they'll also be really confused why other 5 Iron Frenzy albums aren't on there. Like I liked 5 Iron Frenzy and like MXPX and them so much that I had like my backpack. I had their names, like I wrote them on my backpack in like a whiteout pen. I probably had my sister who had nicer handwriting do it, and I had like the white and black checkers like on my backpack for like that, but including like I had fifth, for 5 Iron Frenzy. But yeah, like Litmus, Banner Year, Superpower, Sucker Punch, and I have to include Where is Micah, because this is a frequent question in our household. Our most mischievous child is named Micah, and we're always trying to keep tabs on him, particularly where he is and what he's doing. So I really can relate to that song and that question of like, yeah, where is Mike? As I was listening to this, kind of preparing, trying to sort through things, I was like, yeah, that might be the official anthem of my household right now, with our wonderful 2-year-old that is getting into all sorts of trouble. Do you have any thoughts about it, like MXPX, 5 Iron Frenzy? I kind of blew through them, and of course, Joy Electric.
I think those are some of the top-notch fun bands of CCM. I thought my personal tastes are more for the, sincere Jars of Clay type stuff. But, every once in a while obviously I enjoy MXPX and 5 Iron and things like Dandelions was my big 5 Iron Frenzy jam that I played over and over back in the day.
Gotcha. Like, I think I was hooked on them after My Evil Plan to Save the World. Like, that was just so funny to like teenage me when that got introduced to me. I thought that was a really clever framing of things. But yes, we'll get into like the fun in a little bit, because those bands do make it fun, but in a way that's like not cheesy. Versus, right. I think that there's some popular CCM bands that I have expressed my opinion on Twitter that are really cheesy. That like if you take some of their songs and you have them done by 5 Iron Frenzy, they all of a sudden become more interesting, because they're like, hey, Reese is having fun here. He's making fun of it. Like it's a wink and a nod, not a sincere cringy lyric, right? But moving forward, number 6 is Sixpence None the Richer's Self-Titled. Right? I know that others are going to disagree with this, probably being their best album or favorite album of mine. But like Kiss Me and their cover of There She Goes is excellent. Like the Law's There She Goes is one of my favorite songs of the 90s, and then they do such a beautiful job with it. And then Kiss Me is really great. But I Won't Stay Long, I Can't Catch You, and then there's others that are really good on there too. I am boomeranging back to Joy Electric with Robot Rock at number 5. So, and again, that has to do with Sugar Rush, which is like I've described as unhinged in the best way possible. It's almost like Buddy the Elf, like I love you scene, but like captured in music. But like Monosynth, We Are Taking Over, and I'm Your Boy are other ones that jump out. Ronnie Martin has continued to make good music. His Christmas album or winter album, whatever you want to call that, is solid that he dropped this year too. And I think Sugar Rush was the first song that you introduced me to from them, and that was my immediate reaction. I was like, this is completely unhinged, and I love this. It's a love song, right? And it captures that that behind that energy that you have when you're like madly in love with something.
Right.
And so that jumps out to me. Like transitioning back to maybe the more in your realm, Switchfoot's New Way to Be Human is in at number 4. Right? The title track is great. Let That Be Enough. Only Hope. Amy's song, Company Car, is clever. Kind of, again, I think a little bit subversive, I like. Switchfoot is awesome live. I don't know if you've ever seen them live. But yes, this was number 4 for me. A little bit of seriousness in the midst of, of the less serious.
Right.
And then like way on the opposite end of that, because I haven't mentioned them and they're the one that I often push in your tournaments, is OC Supertones, Chase the Sun.
Nice.
I have a lot of love for the first 3 Supertone albums. But I think this one is my favorite. At least I'm saying that it is. But I think it's possibly because my older sister played this one the most. It had some huge influence, but like Fade Away, Chase the Sun, Away From You, One Voice, Hallelujah, and then Refuge, which is like very different from them, right? It's an acoustic guitar, it's slowed down. They made CCM music fun. And again, in like a way that wasn't cheesy though.
Yeah.
Because there was so much mainstream CCM that you're like, man, this is cringeworthy. This is bad. Like this is a Hallmark movie of music. And OC Supertones just were like, yeah, we're gonna have fun with it and enjoy it. And so yeah, like, and again, the first 3 albums are all great. I think most folks really like their second album more.
Yeah.
But this one I think has a little bit more heart to it. At least for me.
I liked that it had a few songs that my local Christian music station played, which none of their previous stuff did. Like Away From You, like they played that. Things like that were just nice little refreshers from the typical stuff. So I like that they put a few, they experimented a little bit with more adult contemporary-ish songs. Definitely not straight adult contemporary, but
no, but I think this is a serious album, but there's still some fun in there.
Yeah.
And then number 2 we've already talked about, DC Talk Jesus Freak. Like what's more to say about that. And then number 1 is Jars of Clay, self-titled. Again, we've talked about my love for that. But it would not including this, I thought about like, I already mentioned those. Maybe I shouldn't include those here. Nah, like it's not those 2, then I don't think I get into this stuff.
Right.
But there's a bunch of honorable mentions because they're just things that are too new for me. But like Poor Old Lou, love the stuff. Like that is fantastic. Miss Angie, Jennifer Knapp, and Chasing Furries. Jeez. All good tunes.
Yeah.
Right.
Those are...
But yeah, like those are mine. What I miss, or what did you not get to wax poetically on that you might in the CCM realm? Maybe in this like more alternative realm that I apparently exist in.
Well, I guess my first thought of one we haven't mentioned is Take Me to Your Later by Newsboys is probably a pretty beloved 90s CCM album that neither of us mentioned. Are you not much of a fan of old Newsboys?
What other songs in particular? I was actually talking about this with my wife. Like, you ever have a band that they just release one song that you hate that song so much that you discount all their other music and refuse to listen to them? Unfortunately, that's Newsboys for me.
Fair enough. Let's see. What The Waiting had some good stuff. What were you gonna say?
Audio Adrenaline, I think had some tolerable stuff as well in there. They were not as popular with my older sister and her friends that heavily shaped this music. But there's stuff that you go back, you find some decent tunes from them.
Yeah. And Barry Blair, the original guitarist, I went to church with him a few years ago for a good while, and he's just a quality guy. for the longest time, you know, didn't even know he was a member of this band that I grew up listening to, because, you know, it's been a long time since he was in the band, and I didn't know his, I knew him as Barry, just didn't know his last name.
Sure.
It's like, he's just a humble guy.
Nice. One that I forgot to mention earlier is Caedmon's Call, right? Like 40 Acres. Solid tunes. Though ironic, like it's not the I forget her name. The two of my favorite tracks are on there are actually from their female vocalist, not from Derek Webb. So I like Derek Webb's more recent stuff, but yes, my two favorite tracks on there are not from their more noteworthy frontmen. But there's other ones. But yeah, this was fun, man. And then like CC on Twitter has made me find I found more 90s alternative Christian music in the past like 6 to 9 months than I had probably in the previous decade or two, since like definitely since college, especially 90s era. Like when we get to 2000s, like you'll see some more of this stuff kind of pop back in. But yeah, lots of good tunes.
There was so much good stuff like that wasn't like, wasn't getting the radio play that DC Talk and Jars of Clay and them were, like just a wealth of good bands in that scene that unfairly gone overlooked, but hopefully CCM Twitter's,
reviving. I think
revived
a
little bit.
Yeah, it's for me. One thing I forgot to mention earlier that is actually separate from this list is like, I don't know if you noticed, like 7 of my top 10 non-CCM are all from like 1995. Apparently 1995 was the year of like really fantastic 90s music, in my opinion.
All of mine were 96 or later, except for Wish by The Cure. Because I think I told you 96, I think, was when I got my first CD player. And so that was when I, really started developing my own tastes in music and things like that. And those albums from those years were very formative for me.
Yeah, man, it sticks with you. Like that's why I think the 2000s are gonna hurt us even more. I think you and I were. I don't know if you ended up expanding to 20 albums a year for your 90s list or something.
I did.
10. Yeah, but it's gonna get harder as we get more and more recent. Because I've already started working on the 2000s, and I have one year that's got like 30 something albums in it. I'm gonna cut it down, but like
Well, I mean, Tooth and Nail there for a while we're releasing like 30 albums a year, so
right, like Tooth and Nail, man, like just we're releasing some ridiculously good, diverse albums that it's a record label that released, ska and punk and metal and metalcore and then Copeland and May and then randomly like Joy Electric, who I think Martin I was listening to the other day referred to them as like the stepchild of Tooth and Nail, that like they're knocking on the door like, can we come out and play? But then of course they had some mainstream folks on there too that I think I may have made the joke when we were going through the Tooth and Nail bracket of like that person paid for everybody else to release music.
MXTX were probably one of those.
MXPX. I'm blanking on who. It's like a solo performer.
Jerry McCamp.
There it is. Yeah. And it's probably him and MXPX paid for like, I don't know, 5 people to listen to Copeland, and Joy Electric.
Speaking of Tooth and Nail and 90s music, I'm not sure if a lot of people probably weren't aware, but Brandon Ebel, the founder of Tooth and Nail, started another small record label at one time that was for just mainstream bands, and the Presidents of the United States of America, I believe, put out an album on that record label. I think that may have been like the only release, but
that's funny.
I guess now let's see what people had to say on Twitter about their favorite 90s albums. Let's see here. All right, we got Blindside self-titled, Chasing Furies with Abandon, Third Day self-titled. That's another one we didn't mention. That was a big album for me as well. Caedmon's Call self-titled. We have the Holy Trinity of Green Day, Dookie, Insomniac, and Nimrod. Let's see, Great Lengths by PFR. Clarity by Jimmy World, which is another one that just missed mine.
I just missed mine. Again, my Arizona love is coming through there, man.
That may have been our highest in common album then.
Yeah, I think I had it, I don't know, 12, 13, somewhere in there.
I don't remember exactly where mine is, but it's up there. Jars of Clay self-titled from our friend Josh Baylog.
And he's a wise man.
Yeah. He knows Jars of Clay better than me. So, it's 2 against 1. Y'all got me on that. A Liturgy, a Legacy, and a Ragamuffin Band, Rich Mullins, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Bad Motorfinger by Soundgarden. Beats and Beatdowns by 5 Iron Frenzy. Stone by Sometimes Sunday. That's a dark horse pick. Faith, Hope, and Love by King's X. Another Dookie by Green Day. Robert Earl Keen, Gringo Honeymoon. I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah,
Modest Mouse, Lonesome Crowded West.
Mm-hmm.
Metallica's Black Album. Human Clay by Creed. Getting into some of the big hard rock albums of the decade. Nouveau, and This Is How I Feel. Girlfriend by Matthew Sweet. Life in General, MXPX. Finally, a Jesus Freak. That took way too long for CCM Twitter to mention Jesus Freak in these comments.
I'm disappointed. Like I often feel like I'm walking the fine line to be like, yeah, it's good, but like it's not the best, but it's good.
I don't know if you've seen them, but there have been heated debates about Jesus Freak. It's been one of the more heated debates I've seen on CCM Twitter since it became a thing.
I mean, honestly, Wiggles Around Like Marmalade Jelly almost got him out of my top 10. Like that line itself just nearly.
Then we got Change Your World by Michael W. Smith and 40 Acres by Caedmon's Call. Are you still with me, or did you freeze? Oh, there you are. All right, you froze. You froze on me there for a second. All right, that's all the replies we got there. So, do you have anything else before we sign off?
Wow, this is tons of fun, man. I enjoy these. I hope folks enjoy our rants. Thanks for sticking with us for so long.
Yeah, I think people will be into it. Follow AJ at AJ Simmons 1987 on Twitter/X. Thanks again to Kylan Savage for editing and graphics, and be sure to check out him on one of my favorite podcasts, Church Jams Now. And thanks for tuning in. Subscribe and tell us, if there's anything you'd like for us to specifically talk about when we do our 2000s episode at some point.
Do want to give a quick thanks to MC Dragon for verifying that MXPX was still a CCM band.
Yeah.
And slowly going. I wasn't sure what the cutoff was. He says he goes through the next album. He is our resident scholar in New Zealand for the subject of MXPX. So
shout out.
I checked with our Yes, I checked with our New Zealand correspondent. So
all right. I think that's all we got then.
Yeah.
So,
thanks.
Thanks for tuning in. Bye.
See you.